Some stories begin with a race, others begin with a meal. This one begins with both. In the Turkish city of Mersin, a municipal soup kitchen was serving lunch as it does every day. These kitchens provide warm meals to people who might otherwise go hungry. Families struggling to make ends meet, elderly residents living on limited incomes, workers passing through between shifts. The meal that day was quite simple. A traditional dish, sautéed meat cooked slowly with spices. For many diners, it was just another lunch. But for one person, the meal suddenly became something else. Midway through eating, they felt something hard between their teeth. At first, it seemed like a bone. But when they pulled it from the food, what they found didn't look like bone at all. It was small, metallic, about the size of a grain of rice. Authorities were called, and when investigators examined the object more closely, they realized it was not a fragment of kitchen equipment or packaging. It was a microchip. The kind implanted beneath the skin of horses. Within hours, that tiny device would reveal a disturbing truth. The meat served in that soup kitchen had come from a racehorse, and that horse had a name, Smart Latch. Before the scandal, before the investigation, Smart Latch was simply another young thoroughbred on the racetrack. She was a 4-year-old mare, bred and trained for speed. Like thousands of racehorses around the world, her life began early, long before most horses reach maturity. Racehorses start training as juveniles. Their days are structured around routines, morning gallops at sunrise, veterinary checks, feeding schedules, and rest. For these animals, life revolves around the racetrack. Smart Latch showed enough promise to make it into competition. Over the course of her career, she raced 13 times and won 3 races. She wasn't a champion that filled stadiums with cheering crowds, but she was a capable racehorse, one of the many athletes who make up the backbone of the sport. Most of her races took place at the Adana Hippodrome, one of Turkey's prominent racing venues. For a while, her life followed a familiar pattern: training, racing, recovery. But racing careers are fragile. Sometimes they end slowly, and sometimes they end in an instant. For Smart Latch, it happened during a race in October 2025. Somewhere along the track, something went wrong, a misstep, a stumble, then the injury. Smart Latch suffered a serious leg fracture, a devastating outcome for any racehorse. A horse's legs are powerful but delicate. Nearly all of their weight rests on slender limbs built for speed rather than durability. When those limbs break, the consequences can be severe. For Smart Latch, the injury meant her racing career was over. But her life, it seemed, was not. Her owner brought the mare back to his farm. Like many racehorse owners, he hoped she could begin a second career. For retired racehorses, breeding often provides a new purpose. Even if their racing days are finished, their genetics can continue through future generations. That was the plan. Smart Latch would become a broodmare. But once again, fate intervened. Veterinary examinations revealed a problem. The mare had a reproductive condition that meant she could not produce foals. The second career disappeared before it even began. Now the owner faced a difficult question: what should happen to the horse? For many racehorses, retirement can be uncertain. But the owner believed he had found a solution that would give the mare a peaceful future. He donated Smart Latch to a riding club where children could learn to ride. Instead of racing gates and starting bells, the horse would spend her days helping beginners learn balance and confidence in the saddle. It seemed like a gentle ending for a horse whose competitive days were behind her. A transporter was arranged. The horse was loaded for the journey. The destination was the riding school. But Smart Latch would never arrive. Somewhere between the farm and the riding club, the horse vanished. Months passed without explanation. The owner assumed the horse had reached the riding school and begun her new life. There was no reason to suspect anything had gone wrong. until investigators made a discovery hundreds of miles away, inside that soup kitchen in Mersin. The microchip found in the meal was scanned, and within seconds, a record appeared in the national database. The chip belonged to Smart Latch. Authorities quickly tested the meat from the dish. Laboratory analysis confirmed what investigators already feared. The meat came from a single-hoofed animal, a category that includes horses. In other words, diners at that soup kitchen had unknowingly been served horse meat, and not just any horse, a registered racehorse. The discovery triggered an immediate investigation. How had a racehorse ended up in the food supply? And more specifically, how had it ended up in a municipal kitchen? Investigators began tracing the path of the meat backward through the chain supply. Their findings suggested a troubling sequence of events. Instead of reaching the riding school, Smart Latch had likely been diverted to an illegal slaughter operation. There, the horse was killed. The meat then entered the commercial food market, but it did not remain labeled as horse meat. Instead, it was falsely labeled as beef. That false label allowed it to move through distributors unannounced. Eventually, the meat was purchased by a supplier providing food for the municipal soup kitchen. By the time it reached the kitchen, no one realized what it truly was. Authorities acted quickly once the discovery became public. More than 200 kilograms of the dish were destroyed as a precaution. Food inspectors began examining suppliers. Prosecutors launched a criminal investigation. Officials started asking difficult questions. Who diverted the horse? Who slaughtered it? Who mislabeled the meat? And how many other animals might have entered the supply chain without anyone noticing? For Smart Latch's owner, the news was devastating. The horse he believed was living peacefully at a riding school had instead vanished into an illegal system he never knew existed. There is a strange irony in this story. Every racehorse carries a microchip. The technology exists to protect them, to ensure that horses can always be identified and tracked. Yet, somehow, Smart Latch had still disappeared. But in the end, the very device meant to protect her was the one that exposed the truth. Without that tiny microchip, the horse's fate might never have been discovered. The meat would have been eaten, the story would have vanished. Instead, a device the size of a grain of rice revealed everything. From the racetrack, to the transporter, to the slaughterhouse, to a soup kitchen meal. And the story of Smart Latch became something larger than a single scandal. It became a reminder of a difficult question the horse world continues to face. What happens to racehorses when their careers end? Some find new homes, some become breeding animals, some go on to teach young riders. But not all of them are accounted for. Smart Latch was supposed to have a second life. Instead, her story ended in a way no one could have imagined. Once she ran down a racetrack surrounded by cheering crowds, a young thoroughbred with speed and promise. But her final chapter was written somewhere far from the track, revealed only by a tiny microchip, and a discovery that shocked an entire industry.